Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us at such a late starting time. My name is Michael Van Hardingsfeld, and I am a program officer at the Japan Foundation Los Angeles. It is my great privilege to welcome you to this special lecture titled From Himiko to Itako, Female Shamans in Japan, about the Japanese women who work as shamans and commune with the gods. Tonight's presentation draws on the work of Dr. Marianna Zanetta, who obtained her PhD at Sorbonne University in Paris with research about Itako shamanism in contemporary Japan. She conducted different fieldworks in Tohoku from 2012, with a particular attention to the Aomori prefecture and the folk practices of the region. Alongside the interest in female shamanism, she is researching the topic of death and dying in Japan, and how contemporary society deals with the new challenges within this pivotal theme. In 2017, she founded a cultural organization to promote Japanese culture and literature in Italy. If you have questions for Dr. Zanetta, please use the question and answer function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will relay these to her during the Q&A session immediately following this lecture. I am also happy to announce that a recording of this lecture will be made available on our YouTube channel. Please keep an eye out for the link in a follow-up email within the next week. Now, I am pleased to hand the virtual microphone over to Dr. Marianna Zanetta.
Good evening. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for the time for this presentation and this chat about shamanism in Japan. I'm going to share the screen, so let me know if everything works. You should be able to see the screen now and the presentation with the title From Himiko to Itako. Let me know if everything works. So we are here today to speak and to talk about shamanic practices in contemporary Japan, but in order to do so, we should have a little bit of attention about other elements that I think are important to understand the phenomenon. First of all, we are talking about shamanism, but it's important to understand what is shamanism, what is the term, what is the origins, what is the concept behind this term, and who is the shaman. So what is the role of this person in the society in which he or she is operating? When we enter the Japan territory now, we should be we should start and see what are the most popular shamanic practices in Japan, with a brief history of the practice itself, and then what is the contemporary relation between shamanic practices as a shaman practitioner, the local communities, and the wider national public. As I was saying in the beginning, it is important to understand what is a shaman, what is shamanism, because it is a term that today is very widespread in some context, and we may have a few problem or differences in the concept of shamanism. The word derives from the Tungus, which is Siberian area, shaman, one who is excited or moved or raised, and it is considered to be of local origin, so from the Tungus area, but sometimes it has been traced to China, also to Chinese terms, in reference to a Buddhist monk. When we talk about shamanism and shamans, we often find ourselves to study the Russian phenomenon, so the Siberia phenomenon, and the first definition are from a Russian ethnographer who stated that the shaman is an intermediary between humans and the world of spirits. And I think this is a very interesting definition, and it's something that is still interesting today, even in Japan, because when we talk about Japan, we will meet some women, especially, that are the mediator between the worlds of the humans on one hand and of the spirit on the other hand. Let's say that in time, the definition is also being enriched And shaman is a person of both sexes who have mastered spirit, who can introduce the spirit into themselves and use their power to help other people, to help the community that suffer, maybe also because of these spirits. It's important to remember, and I will be very quick in this slide, so don't worry, but it's very important to remember that the first researcher and the first reports on shamanism are from a very ancient time, the 18th century, the 17th century to be more precise, and are the reports of priests, Orthodox priests, who consider the shaman a religious figure, but working for the devil. So we know that for the first time, for the first centuries, the shamanism is probably been considered in not such an interesting or such an flattering way. With enlightenment and the more observer that arrive in Siberia, so we have explorer, administrator, but also scientists that arrived to Siberia, then the theory shifts a little bit, and sometimes we see a majority of people trying to describe the shamans as healing as a kind of a doctor, of a healing practitioner, a healing specialist. Again, if you have doubts, you can interrupt me and we will address them. So in time, we arrive at the 20th century. It's important to understand that it's a very long research, a very long debate that has been going on in time since the beginning of the research in the 17th century. But the shaman is considered in the 20th century like a how to say, a therapeutic practitioner, so someone that can help in a kind of parapsychoanalytic type of practices. And also, it's considered to be shamanism, like kind of a spiritual quest, a technique for seeking self-promotion. But the first definition holds. So shaman is, again, a mediator between the human and the spirit world. And this ability is achieved, this capacity, this potential is achieved through a set of specific method and techniques. One of the biggest researchers that we have to meet when we talk about shamanism is Mircea Eliade, because he's the one that offered the first wide analysis of the contest, analysis of the practices, and try to put together a comparison of the shamanic phenomenon all over the world. His main work is from the 61, the Shamanisme et la technique archaïque de l'extase. And in this huge work, Eliade tried to put together all the traces, all the experiences of shamanic phenomenon all around the world, and defined shamanism as defined the shaman as the master of the ecstatic trance or the archaic techniques of ecstasies. He also considered the Siberian shaman as the prototype of all shamans, and put a lot of interest in the ecstatic journey and the interaction with the spirit. And this may seem not so relevant, but when we arrive to Japan, it's kind of an interesting element, because the ecstatic journey is it's the practice according to which the shaman itself or herself flies in the other dimension and travel in the other dimension. And so this is a very defining elements of the shamanism according to Eliade. And in this immense work, he also tries and define how to become a shaman. So the shaman is a person, a man or a woman, that can achieve this position through hereditary transmission. So kind of a line of a family that hold a position, or through a spontaneous vocation, the call, which is called hysteric crisis, and it's characterized by sickness, pains, visions, painful transformation, let's say. And in both cases, the shaman has to undergo a very intense training and studying, sometimes with the lead, with the guide of an older shamans, and achieve the status of shaman practitioner through initiation rite. The work of Eliade was a huge work, was very important in the field, and started to define, put some definition to the work of the shamanic specialists around the world. But it has a lot of flaws. First of all, Eliade was not a field worker. This means that all the material he wrote about and he gathered was material from other sources, mainly religious sources, so it could be vague or unverified. And also his work often is very rigid and in the definition, and does not allow for a complete understanding of those practices that are not so specifically identical to the Siberian shamanism. After Eliade, a lot of other researchers arrived onto the scene. I've named a few there. So Lewis, Hamayon, Oldkranz, Lambert, Combat. Those are all people and researchers and professors who studied the shamanism in the late 10, 20, 30 years. And they focus more on other elements that are a little bit distant from Eliade. They arrived to a more wide approach to shamanism that consider, of course, spirit possession and mastery of a spirit essential to shamanism, whereas before spirit possession was a little bit controversial because spirit possession was different than the ecstatic journey. And so Eliade was not very keen to include it in the definition. But also we have less focus on the so-called Arctic hysteria, and trance and ecstasies are no longer conceived as central traits of the shamanic experience. Trance and ecstasies are those, those state of mind in which the mind of the shaman is dissociated from the body. And so these were considered to be the main elements to verify the shamanic experience, but nowadays this is not longer the main element, and this is important also in the Japanese context. And again, the most important thing is now considered to be the role of the shaman in the society. So not so much the way in which the shaman expresses itself or herself, but the role the society recognizes the shaman to have. I understand that this is very complex, so if, again, you have any question later, I am very happy to deepen the conversation, but I don't want to be very so in-depth about the shamanism itself, and I'd like to go now into Japan. This is the main element of the topic, so I don't want to lose time on other things. Japan has a very specific religious background. We are in a context in which there are different religions. We have we have Shintoism and we have Buddhism primarily. So we are in a very different context than, for example, Siberia, but also very different context than Europe or the United States, in which there is one specific religion's context, one religion, which is usually the Christian-derived religions. And so this is very important to understand how the Japanese phenomenon of shamanism evolve. Shintoism is a kind of animism in which every element of the world can be considered divine, whereas on the other hand, Buddhism is more maybe renowned religions that arrive from India through China and Korea in Japan in the 6th century. And these two religions still today, they still interact a lot, and people practice both religions according to the different moments of life and the different rituals that they have to, and practices that they have to attend. In this context, shamanism was a very important element in the beginning of, let's say, the interaction between Shinto and Buddhism, but it also still today an element very important in the religious background of the Japanese society. There are different. It has been studied just in the last 60, 70 years, mainly. But at this stage, the researcher considered Japanese shamanism with different element. First of all, it's mainly feminine. So we tend to connect the shamanistic practice to Himiko, and then we will see who she is, with Ame no Uzume, which is a kami, so a Shinto deity, and other figures of female characters. Also, we see that the shamanism in Japan is mainly based on trance, so the altered state of mind caused by kami, again, the Shinto gods, and then the spirit possession. We see different kind of entrance in the practice, so different kind of vocation. We have the hereditary traditions and the spontaneous one. And there is a strong accent placed upon the initiation to be recognized as shamans, as Miko. Now we will try and offer some definitions. But also the researchers now consider important to recognize the Miko and the role that this performer had in the society. Researchers like Nakayama Taro, but also Hori Ichiro, tried and locate two main types of shamanic practices in Japan. One is the Jinja Miko, or Kanagi, which is connected to the Shinto shrines. And the other one is the Kuchiyose Miko, which are more like wandering practitioners who offered invocation rituals. I think that for the comprehension and understanding of the phenomenon, it is important to have a look to Himiko, because we said that shamanism in Japan is mainly female, so shaman practitioners here are mainly women. And this is the first, maybe the first women in power that we are that we recorded in history in Japan. Himiko is a semi-legendary queen. We see her name in the Chinese chronicles in the 3rd century. And the chronicles talk about Himiko as the ruler of the Yamatai, who can somehow has magical power and can possess also spiritual power and can talk to the, not the kami, but the gods, and talk to the spirit world. It's also said that she rules through these powers, so she is in a very strong position, and this is important, in a very strong position, and these powers for her are a means to govern the country. Her practice as a shaman is also how to say, is a part of the public sphere, but the main role of interaction with the public is in the hands of his brother, who work as an intermediary between the shaman herself, so between Himiko and the people. We don't have a lot of material and resources and actual records about Himiko, but she for sure one of the most important elements that helps us locate the ancient origins of shamanic practices in Japan, and also that helps us understand that this was a female practice. In the beginning, it was a female practice, and it was also a practice for people in power. We also have some reference of shamanic practices in the ancient myth, such as the Kojiki. The Kojiki, maybe I say something obvious, but sometimes it's also useful to say these things again. But the Kojiki is one of the first books of first collections ever written in Japanese language, sort of, and it collects all the mythology of the ancient Shintoism in connection with the imperial dynasty. So within the Kojiki, we have traces of shamanic practices, especially in some mythological tellings, such as the one of Ameno Uzume. Ameno Uzume is a kami, is a very powerful kami that helps to bring back the lights of Amaterasu to the world, in an episode in which she locked up herself within a cave to hide from the terrible deeds of the brother Susanoo. So when Amaterasu hides herself in the cave, it's Ameno Uzume who starts dancing and moving very intensely and singing. So it's kind of a shamanic rituals. And thanks to this ritual, Amaterasu comes back to the world and the lights come back to the people in the world. So this is always considered to be the first mythological element, the first mythological trace of shamanic practices in ancient Japan. I'm sorry, I just see that there are in chat a few. I'm sorry. Okay, perfect. So from this very ancient and also mythological traces of Japanism, shamanism in Japan, there are different studies that also today are very important in the understanding of the practices. As I mentioned before, there are different researchers. Hori Ichiro is probably the most important one. Gorai Shigeru also is very important. And these researchers tries to understand the role of shamanic practitioners within the society in Japan. As you can see here, there are different kind of evaluation of the influences of other areas within the shamanic practices in Japan itself. Maybe some of these influence arrive from the Arctic area, from the Siberian area. So like, for example, the Hokkaido, the Ryukyu Island, maybe some kind of they can derive from these kind of practices, but also the Polynesian type of shamanism, which is another kind of derivation. And the most important thing is that the contemporary research also focus a lot on the social role and the function of a shaman, in particular in connection with the abnormal social event. So according to this researcher, the shaman is a figure in Japan that helps in specific contexts, in specific conditions, and try to help the society finding a new stability. So again, he is a mediator, she is a mediator between the world of the living and the world of the dead, the world of the human, the world of the spirits, but also in particular difficult personal and social situation. This is very important also today because the contemporary practices in Japan are very significant when people have to face personal trauma, personal instability, or personal difficult conditions at times. When we speak about shamanism, this is a very, very specific element, but it's important to remember that shamanism and shaman and shamanic practices are all terms that we apply to Japan in an arbitrary way. Japanese languages use other terms. Shaman is a very recent introduction, but researchers usually use the word Fusha or Minkan Fusha, because these are the local terms and these are the words that define the practitioner. Minkan Fusha in particular is very interesting because Minkan, which is popular, so local, so something that it's not institutionalized, also helps us understand how shamanic practices evolved in the course of history. As we say before, in the beginning, shamanism was a very dominant and it was a practice very connected to power, with the Himiko and with her role in society. And the first Miko, so the first shamans in the ancient Japan were very important in the institutional world, and they were very important in the context of Shinto shrines, but also in Shinto practices in general. They held a very powerful role and powerful place in the communication with the spirit, with the kami, and so in the understanding of the other world. In time, this position shifted a lot, and today this position of power is almost completely lost. So the tradition, the contemporary tradition, the contemporary shaman are more connected to the Minkan, so the popular or non-institutionalized practices. So all the world that is more like a folklore or is more connected to the religious practices in between the institutionalized religions. Now I'm going to go a little bit more in the contemporary world, in contemporary Japan. Japan has still today a lot of different female practices when we talk about Japan. When we talk about shamanism. Some of the most significant ones are in Northeast, so in the area of Tohoku. In particular, we have a lot of those that are called kami-sama or hayarigami-sama or sensei simply. These are well attested from the Edo period, so from the 17th century on. The first one, the cited Fusha, so the hayarigami-sama, these are women that can perform kamigoto, so some different rituals and practices concerning the kami, and they are often practitioners from maybe the prefecture of the northeast, and it's important I underline here that they are sighted so they can see, and they are women oftentimes in their 40s or 50s. Sorry, a little bit. Okay. The other one is the blind Fusha. So the woman who entered the profession of shamanism with a physical disability. There are different kind of names for this kind of tradition. We have Itako, Arimase, Chiko, Migodo, Onakama, and whatnot. And these are very specific of the northeastern prefectures of Japan. They are very popular, and they have been very popular, especially in the 19th and the 20th century. And they are very popular for the connection with the world of the death. So the calling of the death, the ritual that connects the spirit of the dead with the living family. And also a lot of different rituals that are now disappearing, especially connected to the healing practices and the invocation of the kami for new houses and for the well-being and the fortune of the community. Another area, I'm sorry for the back and forth, which is very important in contemporary Japan when we talk about shamanism, is Okinawa. Okinawa is a region in the southwest of Japan, is a highland region. And there are a lot of different interesting tradition here. One of these are the shamanic practices. And in particular, it's declined in two main practices, which are the one of the Noro and the Yuta. The Noro are still very relevant, and they still hold a very important position in society. They are hereditary priests appointed to serve the communities, and they were sanctioned by the royal court in the beginning, in the ancient time, in traditional time. But they're still very recognized today, and they still hold a very important place in the Ryukyu and Okinawan culture. On the other hand, we have the Yuta, who are independent shamans and who obtain the powers after experiencing spiritual illness or vision. So they're kind of more similar to the shamanic practices in Siberia. When we talk about the rest of Japan, as I said, there are different kind of Fusha, the sighted one, the blind one. They are very local. They are very local in the sense that they work a lot with the local communities and with the local people. So they are very renowned in the prefectures, in the communities. And both the sighted Fusha and the blind Fusha are women who achieve the role through an intense training. We talk about the training before concerning to the other shamanic practices, but here it's very important because we have two different approach to the practice of shamanism, two different outcomes, but in altogether we have the idea that the woman who wants to become a shaman for different reasons has to undergo an intense practice, a period of practice that can help her achieve spiritual power and spiritual understanding of the other world. I just wanted to put a little bit of an accent on this, sorry, again. When I talk about the practice and the path that they have to follow in order to become shamans, there are different ways in which they can achieve this. Sighted Fusha, so the kami-sama, the general practitioner, the practitioner that you can find in northeastern Japan, but also in the other area of the country. Oftentimes they achieve this role by an accident, a traumatic event in their own life, an illness, something that can be understood as a sign of the kami or the gods that they need to enter the profession. Sometimes they don't want to, so they reject the call, and the kami again try and call them in. But once they decide to follow the path and become kami-sama, they enter a period of practice, oftentimes alone in the mountains, with a lot of ascetic trainings, with a lot of separation from the normal world, from the public world, and they begin to refine everything that is the connection with the god and the kami especially. So they are away from society for a long time. It depends on the age, on the ability of the single woman, but for a long time. And then when they come back, they begin to offer their practice and their services to the people around them. So these services includes, as we said, kamigoto, divination rituals, healing rituals, and everything that can help people to, as we said before, to face particular situation of crisis in their own life. On the other end, when we talk about the blind Fusha, which are more connected to the northern prefectures, so the Aomori, for example, Akita, Iwate regions, these practitioners have a very different path, have a very different approach to the world, into the dimension of shamanic practices. They are people with disabilities. They are people that are born or that become blind in very early age, at a very early age, and therefore they choose the practice, or better again, the family, the community chooses the practice for her in order to offer an alternative, to be independent and to be able to provide for herself. So when a young woman, often a girl, a child, enter the Itako, for example, the Itako practice, she would undergo years of practices with an older shaman, with an older Itako, in order to understand, comprehend, and learn of the traditions, of the practices, all the prayers, all the chants that she has then to perform during her life as a proper Itako. So this is a different kind of approach to the profession. And there, when we talk about this kind of shamanism, so Itako, blind Fusha, Eliade, in his book from the 1961, talked about them in not such a flattering way, because they choose this profession. They enter the profession willingly for need. So in his eyes, they were not actual shaman because they did not experience the call, the so-called call to the profession. Nowadays, with the contemporary theories about shamanism, they can be considered shamans because they fulfill a specific role in the society, but also because their apprenticeship is very intense and follows some of the main traits of the traditional apprentice when we talk about shamanism. So seclusion, a moment, a long time, alone, distant from the society, the idea that the shamans has to symbolically die and be rebirthed as a professional. So today, this practice is considered to be part of the shamanic profession. Itako are very interesting, in my opinion. I studied them a lot, so I'd like to focus a little bit more about them. On them, there are some of the most popular today, even if their number is quickly decreasing because the physical problems in the beginning are no longer relevant. But I think it's important to see, it's interesting to see how this profession is changing, how it changed in the last century. and what's the role of the shaman in today Japan. As we said before, Itako is a woman, is a girl, actually, is a child often, was a child. And the reason she enters the apprenticeship is very practical because she's blind. So this was the only element that led to the choice of the Itako profession up until recently. We are in a very rural context where being able of working is a basic requirement, and being blind means not being able to carry out everyday necessities in life and to be a burden for family. So pressing a child to become an Itako was an attempt to provide her for a new social role and help her not to be considered, again, a burden of or a useless member of the society. Of course, given the young age of the girl, the choice was in the hands of the parents or the local community, who often offered money to help the child to pursue this profession. And once the decision was made, the girl went to the house of the older shaman and started the training up until the ritual of Kamitsuke, which was the initiation ritual that allow her to be considered a full-fledged Itako. As we said before, the important things when we think about shamans is the role they fulfill in the society. So when we talk about Itako, their role up until today is to connect the local community to the spiritual dimension, the spiritual world, in particular, the world of the dead. Again, if you have questions, please let me know so that I can address all the doubts. Itako are rapidly changing today. These elements that I talk about here are still very important, but they are rapidly changing in the contemporary practices because of many different factors, because of many different reasons, but they defined the profession for a long time. So when the Itako entered the actual practice, so when she was considered to be a full-fledged shaman, she would use different tools. This is, again, a very common theme in the shamanic practices all around the world. In particular, today, we have the Irataka Jutsu, which is a rosary used during the invocation of the spirits, and the Oshirasama dolls, which are two wooden sticks that are often used as a way to bring good fortunes to new houses and new buildings and new constructions. And still today, Itako are known for two different kind of practices. So we have on one hand the Kamigoto, again, as the cited Fusha. So everything that concerns the world of the Kami, the communication with the Kami, the divination, and the bringing of good luck in this world. And on the other hand, we have the Kuchiyose, or the calling of the dead. These distinctions are important because in times the relevance of these two practices changes. And if up until the, let's say, 1950s, the Itako were popular for both of these practices, nowadays they're very renowned just for the Kuchiyose, so just for the calling of the dead. And this talk about a specific transformation in Japanese society, but also helps us to understand the role of the shaman within the context. There are different variations when we talk about the Kuchiyose. The Kuchiyose is the calling of the spirits of the dead, which means that we are in a very delicate area. Death in Japan is a complex phenomenon when we talk about death, we have to remember that, Shinto practices and Buddhism see death in different ways. And so we have to move across these two different approaches to death. In both cases, death is dangerous because it helps to bring spirits back here. It opens the gates between the spirits and the humans. So we are moving in a very delicate context. Talking to the dead is something that is almost exclusively outside the tradition, the institutionalized religions. Buddhism and Shinto does not offer this kind of dialogue with the dead. So Kuchiyose is one of the few moments in which the living family can actually interact with the deceased one. So when we think about the Kuchiyose, we have to consider that this is a ritual moment in which the living are again talking with the member of the family that is no longer with them. And there are different stage of the dialogue. So the Itako asks some specific questions about the spirits that she's about to invoke. And then she starts a long chant, a traditional chant, depends on the belief of the shamans. It can be a Buddhist chant or a Shinto tradition while using the rosary. And then the deceased show himself or herself through the voice of the shaman, and start to express love, gratitude, and give some advice, some information. So like, please visit my grave, or please continue the family, take care of your children, have children, communication like this. And then asks for further prayers in the future, and then the spirit goes back to his or her dimension, and the Itako finishes the ritual with some chants to release the spirits and the guardian kami. I had to include a picture of the actual Itako. This is me in the very long time ago, 2012, so it was 13 years ago, and we visited Nakamura-san, which is the Itako in the middle, and she offered to perform a Kuchiyose for our interpreter. So this was a very interesting moment to see how the actual shamanic practice took shape in relations to the books tradition. But again, Kuchiyose is still today one of the most important practices when we talk about shamanism, and the first practice connected to Itako. So the Itako today are popular because they practice the Kuchiyose. When we think about shamanic practices and Itako practices, of course, the tradition changed a lot across history and in the recent year I'm sorry, give me a moment. Thank you. The tradition changed a lot. And given the fact that this is not an institutional tradition, it's also difficult to find written document and materials to trace a correct history of the practice. So from the pre-Meiji era, so the centuries before the 19th century, there are different documentation onto which we can read and understand the practices of Itako, but it's more like a regulating documentation. So something that is more of a legislation or law edicts, everything that could help to manage the practice from the government point of view. And then from the Meiji on is all different world in which the shamanic practice is Itako, but also the other Fusha and also other women who practices the shamanic tradition suffered different moment of difficulties. Meiji era was a very important moment in Japanese history because after more than 200 years of sakoku, so the closed country, Japan was forced to open up in 1854-55. So from that moment on, Japan had to face the Western powers, US, UK, France, Germany, and has to reflect upon itself as a country and find a way to interact with the superpower of the West without the fear of being invaded or colonialized. This was the reason why the Meiji era is a huge, pivotal, transformational moment that transformed the Japanese society and that changed a lot of what was before conceived as Japanese. In this moment, we have a shift in the perception of what is modern. So Japan had to enforce a lot of transformation in order to be considered a modern country and a powerful country. So a lot of investment in military, in the schools, in the health system brought from the European countries and the Western countries in general, but also a lot of shedding the hold and so transforming the society, deciding that some of the traditions were no longer valid, no longer useful to promote Japan as a powerful nation. And this is very interesting and very important because this is the moment in which a lot of non-official, non-institutional religious practices were outlawed. Itako and shamanism in general was in this context, so was within the scope of those non-institutional religions that need to be cancelled. So they were public shamed and considered a disturbance to the public safety and health also because many of the shamanic traditions and practitioners were healers. And the newspapers, the journals, and the books up until the 30s, so for more than 4 decades, published a lot of articles to discredit the image of Itako and other female shamans. They were considered to be folk practitioners very close to con artists and prostitutes, so their values and their role in society shifted a lot. They still were very popular in the local communities, but as a wide phenomenon, they were considered to be problematic. So therefore, they were opposed from the government by the government. Again, this is very detailed. I will try and be quicker so that I see there are questions and I can go back and pick the questions. When we arrive to the end of the world, of World War II, so 45, 50s, the idea that Itako were a problem or a disturbance or outlawed changed again. The new constitution allowed for religious freedom, and Itako and other shamans became again a significant element in the society at large. 4 different reasons, among which the fact that Japan entered a new modernization era, so a new rush to be again to survive the end of the World War II and to enter a new growth era, and everything that was considered more traditional had a new allure now. So it was a way to find the old roots and old origins of traditional Japan, of the ancient Japan, of the authentic Japan. And Itako were part of this kind of discourse. So they were really widespread up until the 80s. These are the numbers of the Itako participating in different rituals in the north. And you can see the growth in this time. So from the 50s to the 70s, there were a lot of Itako going to public rituals. And the number was very widespread. But then, of course, from late 90s to nowadays, the Itako are really decreasing as a number. These are the numbers for the public appearance. Of course, the actual numbers are higher, but still the trend is going down. Of course, because blindness is no longer a character that needs to be addressed because the health system is way better than in the 1 century ago, and because of course there are alternatives for people with sight disabilities, and they do not have to enter this kind of profession to find a role. But as I was saying, the Itako have seen the popularity increase because also other moments and other areas of Japan had this how to say, this aura of traditions and a connection to the traditional Japan. And one of the places in which you can see this element of rediscovering the root is the Osorezan, which is a very important sacred place of Tohoku. It's a mountain, it's a volcano, and it's been considered for a long time, from the 60s on in particular, a place to get in touch with the afterworld and with the world of the Buddhas, the Kamis, but also the death. We talk about the occult boom in the 60s, so a moment in which there is a new trend also concerning the Itako, but not as a whole profession. Itako as the communicators, as the mediators with the land of the dead. This is still very interesting today because the Osorezan is still today a very interesting place that you can visit. There is a festival, the Taisai, and at the end of July, more or less, in which Itako gathered at the feet of the mountains, and people go there from all around the country to ask for a Kuchiyose from the Itako. And then they can walk around the mountains and offers different prayers to their own family death. You can see here one of the Itako I interviewed at the Osorezan. This was 2014, so a couple of years after the first one. And even if the numbers are very small comparing to the 80s and the 60s, there is still a lot of people that visit Osorezan to talk to the Itako. So much so that her in particular also offers specific tour in hotel in the prefecture. So all year round, she goes to several hotels and offers Kuchiyose to tourists that come here from Tokyo, Kyoto, or other area of central Japan. And yes, this is one of the queues in front of the Itako. This blue tent here are the Itako tent. And so they are here from, let's say, 4 in the morning up until the 7 at night, and they offer Kuchiyose ritual all day long to people coming from all over the country. So of course, when we think about the role, we are going to ask ourselves why Itako today, why shamans today, why in the contemporary society we still need to call a shaman, to interact with a shaman. There are very different theories about this, and one of the theories that I feel more connected to is the idea that the relations to the shamans speaks about the connections of a family. When we go to the Itako, we talk about our family, and we want to interact with some family member that it's no longer with us. And this is an element that brings us to try and understand how also the family has changed in Japan. Maybe not only in Japan, but how family has changed in Japan, and how the Itako can help improve the connection between the family of the living and the dead. In Japan, the family was a very traditional entity in that the name was Ie. The Ie system was a unit, a structural unit of society, and was the body for ancestor worship. The Ie was a structure in which there was a father figure, a central father figure, and all the different sons in particular were the heirs of the family, and gave birth to the bunke branches of the family. So it was a widespread structure that in some way try and become wider and wider with the generations. The male of the family, so the heirs of the family, became the ancestors, and there were a lot of moments in which the ancestors were prayed and were ritualized. With more modern times, so with contemporary Japan, the different transformation, post-war Japan, also the structure of the family changed. The country faced rapid industrialization, urbanization, also someone says Americanization in lifestyle, and internal migration from the countries to the cities. And all of these brought transformation within the family system. So the passage from the Ie system, the extended family system, to the nuclear system, so a family of just the father, the mother, and the children, had the profound consequences for the family itself and relationship within the family, and the concept of death and afterlife. Because up until the end of the World War II, I'm sorry, I left some word outside, the Ie was the only legal entity, the only legal structure of the family. So only the first child would inherit. But after the Civil Code of 1947, the Ie system was abolished as a legal entity, and so the family changed. And this brought to also a transformation in the relationship within the family member. And so also the relationship with the ancestors and the death changed a lot. The family as a perpetual entity is no longer, how to say, an attainable idea, because society changed a lot. So everything that has to do with the ancestor worship, the management of the grave, the management of the afterlife, it changed immensely in the last 60 years. So maybe, and this is just maybe, the shaman can help us in the moment in which we do not have the traditional ties, the traditional connection anymore, to find a new way to keep the memory, keep the bond, keep the connection between the family of the living and the family of the dead. And so to help us reconnect with the ancestor traditions, the ancestral land, and the ancestral heritage. I saw there is a lot of questions, and there are a lot of questions, and the time is running out, so maybe I can take the questions.
Sure, absolutely. I can ask you some of the questions that have been posed by the attendees. So the first one, thank you very much for your lecture. Do you think the trend for shamans in Japan is downward because of technology creating disconnection with intuition and energy of other realms like the dead?
This is interesting. This is not an easy question. I stopped sharing of the screen. It can be the the contemporary technologies or the world in which we live, which is very connected, very internet, ChatGPT, everything that goes on right now can be a way to detach further from these practices, so to remove them from our everyday life. But sometimes in history, everything that was a quick modernization also brought back some need for more traditional attachment. So yes, there is a lot of modern transformation, a lot of changing, a lot of disconnect, but maybe this is the need. This is something that make us need more of a traditional connection. So this could be the flip of the coin.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Can you speak a little bit about the intersection of the Kaminchu of Okinawa and the Chisei of Ainu culture, the intersection with Japan and Japanese tradition?
Oh yeah, well, I have to say, I'm not an expert on Okinawan or Ainu shamanism and practices, and it's very important to say this because it's like I'm venturing in someone else's territory. Of course, the thing I can say is that Okinawan and Ainu regions are liminal region if we look at them from the central Japan point of view. So Ryukyu was a different reign, was a specific culture, was a different culture from many aspects than the central Japanese culture. And also on the other hand, Ainu traditions were very different and very distant from the traditional, the mainland Japan culture. So those two extremes let us understand the interactions between the imperial Japan in many ways, so the dominant Japan, and the everything that is on the verge, on the borders. Okinawa and Hokkaido are borders in Japan's from central Japan's point of view. So the interactions are important because, of course, Japan had for a lot of time the myth of the unicity of Japan, but the idea that these two areas still hold a lot of cultural relevance helps us understand that Japan is not, a monolith, but there are lots of different cultures. Apart from that, I prefer not to enter in the specifics of Okinawa or Ainu culture in specific because I really am not a specialist on those. But certainly, if we talk about shamanism, those are the two of the main regions that we compare the Itako practices to.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, not a problem at all. So about this intense training that an Itako will undergo, is it local or is it something that's connected to a place that's further abroad from where they were raised? Can you answer?
Yes, sure. So the initiation, the training is very local. It's very local in that oftentimes the girl goes to a very neighbor shaman, so the one that maybe cured her from the childhood is the shaman of the community. So the training is close to the community, even if a lot of the most intense training take place in the mountains. So you have a moment in which the training is within the house of the older Itako, which is probably at the borders of the village. And then there is a moment in which the young apprentice goes to the mountains and practice alone in the darkness in the mountains. So it's close, it's local, but it also, how to say, it also involves the area of the mountains, because mountains in Japan are religions, one of the most religious places you can be, one of the most sacred places you can be, and so they are very important in the training of the Itako and the shamans in general.
Thank you. So the idea of Kuchiyose, does it often coincide with something where there's this the barrier between the living world and the world of the dead are blurred? So does it coincide with like Obon or other specific times when the spirit world is viewed to be closer or open? Can it also be performed at any time? And then adding to that, do you have to go to another place outside of your house to happen, or can you invite an Itako inside your home as well?
Very interesting questions. So yes, Kuchiyose can happen in different times. Oftentimes it is connected with Obon, of course, and maybe the first Obon after the death of the person is the most important one to hold a Kuchiyose for that person. But aside from that, of course, there is the New Year's, so the beginning of the year, and then there is the anniversary of the death. So the moment in which maybe 1 year later, you can have a Kuchiyose for the deceased. And then there are some like the 49th day of the dead, and some of the dates that are also very important for the Buddhist practices are still very important for the Obon. I'm sorry, for the Kuchiyose. So you can have the Itako, all the Kuchiyose in those moments. But for example, in my personal experience, I went to the Itako and asked for a Kuchiyose in normal days, so with no connection with the deceased or with some tradition in Japan, in Japan's practice of the death, and they still managed to hold the Kuchiyose for me. And for the second part of the questions, often today it's you go to the Itako. So you can go to the festivals, to the Thai side, to the public places where they gather, or you can go to their house and ask them for a Kuchiyose. A long time ago, so up until the 60s, you can also call them, especially for healing practices, and have them come to your house. But now it's more common that you go to them for the Kuchiyose.
Wonderful, thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
Sure.
Is there a recognizable reason why there are a lot more shamanistic practices around Tohoku and central northern Japan versus the rest of Japan? And are there other regional practices across the other parts of Japan that are still being practiced, barring the indigenous practices of the Ainu and the Ryukyuan population?
This is very interesting. In my, let's say that Kami-sama, so the site at Fusha, you can find them more or less everywhere in Japan. So there are lots of practices around Kyoto. You can find a lot of practices scattered around the islands. Itako traditions is quite interesting because it's unique in this sense, because there is more like a real tradition passed down from generation to generation. And I can venture and say that the fact that they are very far away from Tokyo, so from the central power, might be one of the reasons why they resisted for so long. So maybe because they were in a rural area, quite disconnected from the other part of the Japanese empire and the Japanese domain. Maybe like Ainu or like Okinawa on the other end, maybe that can be one of the reasons why they resisted, and they kept a lot of autonomy in the centuries. This is my interpretation, let's say. But I think it's interesting because, of course, shamanism in Japan is widespread everywhere. So the kami-sama in general, you can find them also in other area, but they are more like individual practitioners. So they know they belong to a historic tradition, but there is less the idea of a local historic tradition. So maybe the fact that they are so remote can help.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate this.
I hope it was clear enough. I hope you could gather some information about this.
Oh, absolutely. I wish we had more time. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for tonight. I would once again like to thank you, Dr. Zanetta, who, despite the early starting time, 5:30 a.m. in Italy, guided us through.
Why in the beginning I had a little problem in putting the words together. It was very early.
Well, you seem to have found your footing, and you seem to really start getting the ball rolling. So we really appreciate that. We appreciated that you guided us through the little understood world of the shaman and where Japanese women fit within that capacity. And we would also like to thank our online audience for supporting our in-person and online events like this one. So to all our attendees, when you quit out of this lecture, you will be prompted to fill out a questionnaire. Please share your thoughts on this program and on this entire episode. We hope you have a restful evening. Thank you.